Welcome to this visual explainer. Today we're looking into a phenomenon that is so incredibly common, we honestly just take it for granted most of the time. But it is arguably the most profound biological and even philosophical event that happens on our entire planet. I'm talking about the arrival of spring. But we're not just going to talk about the weather warming up. We're going to visually unpack a really fascinating perspective from our source text today. It's a perspective that views this massive seasonal shift not just as some blind mechanical routine, but as a deliberate repeating signature. Let's get right into the sheer scale of what we're actually dealing with here. Okay, let's dive into this massive number, 300,000 plus. Now, that's not just some random statistic. According to the text we're analyzing, this represents the mind-boggling number of distinct plant and animal species that literally come back to life, all across the globe, every single spring. Just think about the logistics of that for a second. From the deepest, most remote forests right down to your own backyard, over 300,000 unique species awaken all at once. It's basically a global biological reboot on a scale that human engineering couldn't even dream of replicating. And it happens everywhere, simultaneously, with absolute precision. Which brings us to a really profound question, which translates to, how is this possible without any invoice being issued, right? Because in our human experience, any major project, any supply chain, especially one with hundreds of thousands of moving parts, comes with a massive financial cost. You've got charges, you've got overhead, and let's face it, there's always inevitable waste. But our source text challenges us to look at the economy of nature, this unimaginable generosity. Feeding, reviving, and sustaining over 300,000 species happens without a single invoice ever being cut. There's no financial cost, no charge to the inhabitants of the Earth, and literally zero logistical waste. So how do we explain the mechanics of such flawless, totally cost-free generosity? Which leads us to Section 1, the Great Awakening every spring. Now, before we even touch the philosophy, we have to just pause and recognize the physical reality of this transition. The world goes from this state of freezing cold dormancy, where landscapes literally look completely dead and barren, to a state of vibrant, explosive life. The text is asking us to stop just walking past this everyday miracle and really, truly observe it. What's actually happening here? The source poses a really striking question. Could this immense generosity actually be a signature? Think about what a signature implies. A signature isn't an accident, right? It represents intent. It shows consistency and identity. If the exact same awakening, with the exact same level of care and precision, happens every single year across those 300,000 species, is it really just blind chance? Or does this repeating event point to the same hand, the same author, signing their work in the medium of nature year after year? Let's move on to Section 2, Flawless Order and Wisdom. Let's see how this builds. If we accept the premise that spring might be a signature, well, we have to look really closely at its characteristics. What does the sheer perfection of this natural order actually tell us about the one holding the pen? To explore that, our source provides a pretty profound observation from the thinker Bediüzzaman Zaman. Read this quote with me. Every year in spring, a limitless power resurrects the lifeless trunks of countless dead trees and recreates more than 300,000 species. I want you to let the weight of that imagery sink in for a moment. He doesn't just say trees grow leaves. He describes them as lifeless trunks, essentially dead wood that are being physically resurrected. The text frames the arrival of spring not just as a shift in the weather, but as a literal repeated act of recreation and resurrection on a massive global scale. So, the crucial point is how Bediüzzaman Zaman extracts specific attributes from this observation. Our source breaks down this signature into 3 distinct parameters. First up, limitless power. Obviously, that's absolutely crucial to execute a global resurrection of life. Second, wasteless but incalculable wisdom. This means the logistics are completely flawless. Despite the massive scale, absolutely nothing is wasted. And third, extraordinary compassion, because this entire system specifically acts to feed and nurture every single needy creature. The text argues, quite simply, that you cannot have this highly specific result without these 3 specific attributes constantly at work behind the scenes. That brings us to Section 3, the unchanging signature in nature. Think about when an art expert looks at a newly discovered canvas. They look for repeating styles, specific brushstrokes, and consistent themes to identify the master artist behind it. Well, the source material is asking us to apply that exact same analytical lens to nature itself. And this brilliantly illustrates the core paradigm shift of this entire explainer. Look at the left side. Here we have the default modern view. Spring as a purely mechanical, random natural event. Just molecules bouncing around that somehow magically result in perfect ecological balance. But on the right side, we have the perspective offered by our source. spring as the deliberate signature of a consistent character. The text argues that the repeating style, the unmatched precision, and the unfailing generosity we see every year are the hallmarks not of random mechanics, but of a master artist consistently revealing their identity. Let's wrap this up with Section 4, a divine promise. So, having synthesized the philosophical argument of this unchanging signature, how do historical and sacred texts actually categorize this data point of spring? Well, they don't view it merely as biology or just some abstract philosophy. They see it as a direct communicative act between the creator and the created. For instance, the source text points to this verse from the Quran, Surah Kahf. It reads, "And we have sent down blessed rain from the sky, and made grow thereby gardens and grain from the harvest, as provision for the servants." Notice the incredibly deliberate language being used here. The rain is the mechanism, the gardens and grain are the physical result, but the ultimate purpose is explicitly stated, as provision. This connects perfectly back to our earlier point about that cost-free invoice. The text frames this entire, massive, flawless ecosystem as a purposeful system of grace, one that is designed specifically to provide for life, completely free of charge. Which leaves us with a final question, translating directly to, have you ever thought of this annually repeating generosity in nature as a signature before? The source material we've explored today really asks us to step out of our routine blindness. The next time the weather warms up and you see a seemingly dead branch suddenly burst into bright green, you have a choice in how you view it. Is it just background noise? Or is it a brilliant, cost-free masterpiece, signed, sealed, and delivered right to your door? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep observing, keep questioning, and I will see you in the next analysis.